been here the last 4 weeks. Let me catch you up to speed about what we're doing. Doing something a little unconventional. I have found that oftentimes we assume, particularly as clergy who have been inundated for 3 very, very intense years, into the intricacies and the theology and history and blah, 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 blah of liturgy. And we assume that because it's our experience, well, of course, our congregation knows everything there is to know that we know about liturgy and possibly even more. That is a very, very unsafe assumption. What I've also found is that the perspectives that we have on liturgy and its function are very diverse, which is one of the gifts that we have as Episcopalians. And I also thought, you know what, if the main time we gather together is Sunday mornings, that's the time where we need to be able to explore things that are central to our lives together. So I decided I'm going to push the envelope just a little bit, and instead of doing sermons that I'm preaching on the lectionary, which of course are super long and full of rich things to preach on, figures, the times when I'm not doing this, it's the stuff of like, how am I going to come up with something on this? I wanted to explore what it is that it means that we do together. So, pop quiz for those of you who have been here. What is liturgy? Someone who's not Jonathan or Lynn. Cindy. Prescribed order of worship. And what is the intention behind that prescription? What is it trying to make? Conversation with God. It's a scripted conversation, a scripted dialogue, if you will. And what makes up liturgy? How is it structured? Rubrics. And what is that? What's the metaphor that the rubrics are? The bones, the skeleton, the structure. And it's been passed down from basically the 2nd century on. So it's a constant thread that's woven into our liturgy that keeps us tied with the earliest church. Now, Jonathan and Lynn, you're also allowed to speak a little bit too at this point. Excellent. They're like I was when I was a teenager. My youth minister had to tell me, Jeff, no, hang on, let somebody else answer. What are the organs, the muscles that give motion and life to that? Theology, excellent. Excellent. So depending on your theological perspective will change how the structure and the life of the liturgy functions. Now, what is the skin that keeps it all contained and finishes the product, so to speak? The readings that we do. The readings are part of it. What is the other R word? We've done blank 1, blank 2, blank 3. Right. Yes, right. R-I-T-E, right. Correct. So that's part of also why we've been doing different liturgical rites each week. We've done Rite 1 with the Great Litany the first week, the very monarchical sort of Enlightenment era medieval church experience. We've done Rite 2, which is the 1979 Prayer Book Standard Liturgy. We've done what is affectionately referred to as Rite 3, which is where we take the order for service, give you the basic rubrics, and then you write something on top of it. And then last week we did the New Zealand Book of Common Prayer liturgy, and this week we're doing the Lindisfarne monastic Celtic communities Eucharist, where we take morning prayer and stick Eucharist in on that to give you different experiences. 5 weeks, 5 different liturgies, so you have slightly different muscles and organs and skins, theology and written liturgy. So it's a scripted conversation, and the structure is the rubrics, the muscles and tissues are the theology, the rites are the skins. What are the basic turns of the conversation? So if I'm having a conversation with you, if I say something to you, Jonathan, and you respond, turn 1, turn 2, and then if I respond again, it's turn 3. So each time someone says something in the conversation, it's a turn. Now, who you are, where you come from, where the liturgy is happening, your theological perspectives, your cultural perspectives, your personal life experiences are what you bring to that conversation as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. Is your head hurting a little bit with this review? Mine is. So if you're having a conversation, you want to make the best one you can. And the scriptedness of liturgy is to give us a chance to kind of look at, okay, what is our collective story of what it means to be in relationship? Because if there's one thing that is the most important thing within our spirituality, it is the three-part thing that I always say. Love of God. Louder. Love of neighbor. And love of self. Love of God, love of neighbor, love of self. If we do nothing else as church, that is what we should be focused on. If the church over the last 2,000 years had prioritized that over the schisms and the politics that divided it, we would have a much better world. I digress on my critique. But what liturgy is designed to do is give us a structure to help us understand collectively how to be in relationship with God together. So, what if you've had a chance, and I apologize if you're newcomers, this is a little bit of a kind of like jumping in the fifth episode of the second season of a show. What are some of the things that have come up for you if you've been able to experience all the liturgical rites thus far, or all these sermons? Like, what are you learning about in this process?
Some of them are definitely more comfortable for me than others.
Mm-hmm. Some are more comfortable for each person than others, and for good reason. So would you say that your perspective, your theology, and your personal experiences impact how comfortable or uncomfortable liturgy is for you?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Raise your hand if that's similar for you. If you've ever been to church at Rite One and you love it, what is it about your life that you love about it? Or Rite Two, what is it that you bring that makes you love it? That sort of thing. And I've found that each rite is so rich because there's so many cool things that are both meaningful and challenging. Like, there's not a single liturgical rite that I'm fully comfortable with. Even the ones that I've written myself, I have to remind myself that this isn't just my theology. I have to think about what is the story, what is the larger conversation, what is the larger story that I am a small part of in terms of how to be church. What else have y'all learned that have had a chance to, or if some of the stuff that I've talked about strikes you as interesting that you want to respond to? Jonathan?
I enjoy the variation. I really enjoy the variation. I don't like doing the same thing day in, day out, or week in, week out, year in, year out.
So there's comfort found in difference and variation. Even I've found it's really fascinating to go from right, and that experience of that difference. What does it bring up for you?
Allows me to stretch and flex and to kind of enjoy kind of different perspectives. I'm the sort of person who can't sit still, both physically and mentally. It's just like my brain spins when it's bored.
Mine too.
And I like having it gives me more to think about and chew on, and it's more engaging.
It's more engaging, which is really important with liturgy. If you've ever been a kid bored in church, if you don't know what's going on, it's really hard to be able to glom on. Or even as an adult, I shocked the youth group recently when I told them how I could not count on my hand how many times as an adult, even as a seminarian, I fell asleep in church. So if church is non-engaging, it's really hard for it to be meaningful. Lenora and then Stephanie.
Similar to what Jonathan was saying, I like personally one things. For me, I think when you see something that's kind of different, when you see something that's a little different, also my brain doesn't swim when it gets bored, but it tunes out. So it keeps me, when things are a little different, and I mean, even if it's just the reading is different and the sermon is different, that clearly is helpful, but it keeps me engaged, where it's even more different than I really pay attention to everything.
It keeps you there, yeah. Good. Excellent. Thank you. Stephanie.
It makes me feel more connected to the spirits of the understanding is mine. So I just feel connected to more people and more richness.
So, yeah. A richer experience not only of being connected to the church past and present, not just that historically, but also interculturally, because of the fact that even though these liturgical rites aren't that outside of standard American culture, there's still a different theological emphasis between New Zealand and Lindisfarne from the United States prayer book. And one of the things that I'd like to do more is really get more into stuff that's really outside of our cultural milieu. So we understand that we are one part of many different cultures in the world to better understand what it means to be part of the whole beloved community of Christ. Has it been challenging for some of you with the different rites each week? Because for some people that comfort is that sameness is really what keeps them anchored.
The different rights, right one, right there, right there, to me sounds like just a wonderful conversation that you have with somebody. Oh, wait a minute, what about this idea? Oh, wait a minute, what about that? Let's chat about this, let's chat about that. That's the way I feel when we're doing the different rights.
So for you, it's the richness of the conversation that you have that you couldn't have if you did the same rite week in, week out, 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 week in, week out. You actually have new information coming in that makes you expand how to think about things and the sense of connection with other people.
I like the difference because I can't wait to see what's coming next. I really enjoyed that part. It's like, I want to go. I want to look and see.
So it makes you curious about what's coming up next, the new, the unexpected, the thing you weren't quite, it isn't rote, which I think is a brilliant metaphor, because if liturgy is supposed to shape how we engage our life with God and one another, we want to have a life where we're not afraid of, but excited about what's next. What is God breathing into this community through God's Spirit that keeps us going, keeps us expanding, growing, stretching, and building God's community here on earth? Excellent. I didn't pay her to say that, by the way.
I'll take donations.
Exactly. They can go on the plate. Right, yeah. Is there anything else? So thus far, we've heard that a lot of what's been going on is a broader conversation. It's really easy for a conversation to be like a nice, coherent square box that makes sense. It's comfortable, it's familiar, we know how it works if we had the same thing over and over again. However, is that nice, coherent square box that things are really familiar the reality of our lives, either with God, with one another, or with the world around us? No. In fact, the whole premise of the story of Jesus is a dramatic challenge to assumptions. Not eradication, but expansion of what it means to be part of the beloved community of God. And so it nudges us towards that curiosity and exploration within the framework of the safety of beloved community, where you have love, where you have trust, where you have support. And again, one of the big pieces that I find lamentable with the beauty and richness of our liturgy normally is if we're supposed to be building loving relationships with God and one another, if our liturgy doesn't allow for that relationship to build, how are we supposed to build that community? How are we supposed to work through the challenges of community when we have conflict? How many of you have seen churches split over something that seemed like it didn't deserve to be split over? Why is that? Because people didn't have the kind of relationship and connection and willingness to risk your safety and being right enough to try to expand and listen to different perspectives, because people didn't feel safe enough to do so. Or the way of engaging the world was either I'm right or I'm wrong, disagreement equals disapproval, and trying to find ways to, okay, I'm not necessarily going to accept what you're saying, but how did you come to your conclusion? And so if our relationships are more important than anything else, not only are we going to stay in a relationship, but the things that the world needs to change, if we're doing this right, cannot but be changed, because that kind of love is a thing that challenges systems of injustice, oppression, violence, all the isms, all the power dynamics that are out of whack, because love wants to build a relationship of safety, trust, community, and connection. You know, small ideas, small orders, nothing really difficult to achieve in this world. But it takes time, it takes building up. So liturgy, if done well, is a conversation that helps us learn how to better be in relationships together. How does this exploration impact how we are going to engage liturgy and our lives together in God in the world around us moving forward? I'll ask that again because it's a big question. With all the things that we've experienced, the things that we've learned, how is this going to impact the way, number one, we experience Sunday morning church, and then how we take out that experience into how we relate to the world outside of us, not just internally? Sure.
When we were discussing culture in class, I would tell them, do this, put your hands together like this. This is our culture. Now take it out and go down one, and this is somebody else's culture. Is it, it's a little uncomfortable, a little bit uncomfortable. Is it wrong?
No.
No, it's not wrong. It's just somebody else's culture. And you have to go back to your own culture.
So,
can we explain it?
Yeah.
Simply.
Yeah, just moving your fingers over one slot like that. Some people really don't like this, some people really do. But it's not a matter of just what's comfortable for us, but how do we expand that experience? And even to the point where, you know what, this doesn't bother me as much as I thought once I get used to it. And I actually can learn from that experience. Anyone else?
Even if we go back to doing mostly right to, or whichever right we do, and we sort of keep the same pattern for a while, if I can keep it in my mind that the whole idea is we're having a conversation with God, I can hear it up and be more attentive. And the big high bar is to be able to go out into the world, and every interaction you have with somebody is a conversation with God. That's a big high bar.
Yeah.
Not even close to you. But, you know, it's a thought to hold.
Well, for you, keeping in mind that this is a conversation changes your attentiveness to what's going on, because you're trying to think about how that relates to you and God. And then the idea of every conversation we have with people in the world around us is a conversation with God sets a very high bar. And that's why we have this wonderful thing called grace, empowerment to do more than we could on our own. And that's the beauty of it all. And if we are thinking about our relationships with other people as also a relationship with God, it reminds us that that each human being has the dignity that God gave them, that no one can give or take away. And that also God is in every person. So in other words, Sunday morning church, from what I'm hearing from all y'all, is the place where this sort of scripted conversation helps us think, helps us check in, as I remember being said one time, on what our relationship dynamic is with God, what our relationship dynamic is with one another, what our relationship dynamic is with ourselves. Because I've often found that the hardest person to love in the world is not other people or God, it's myself. And if you're someone for whom that is a struggle, flip the love your neighbor as yourself to love yourself as your neighbor. If you would give generosity to other people but not to yourself, you're denying someone the generosity that you would give to other people. So, again, this is more of a class than a sermon, but I wanted to kind of put a cap on all these different things, because our liturgy goes, we come together, we gather, we have sort of, hey, how's it going? Welcome, we're getting started. We hear from God through scripture, we hear through God through sermon, we share our stories through sermon sharing, we share our needs to God through the prayers of the people, which is the turn back in the conversation, and then we bring it back together and share our story together through the Eucharist, which reminds us of the ongoing conversation we have with God through Jesus through his love, his example, his teachings, and his willingness to die, even at the hands of hate and fear. And that death can never be completely permanent because life always has the last word. And that word is found in the love of God. So my hope and prayer as we move forward is that as each week we come back to church and experience the liturgy, which will change from time to time and will be similar at other times, what is the conversation we're having with God? How are we having it? How is it impacting our lives to make the world a better place? And how is it enriching our experience of that relationship between God, our neighbors, and ourselves? That is a perfect pausing point to lead into Holy Week. Amen.